Do you think you know the Colosseum? That immense monument, the symbol of Rome, which everyone has seen in photos and movies. Get ready to uncover a story that goes far beyond gladiator fights and the grand victories of the Roman Empire. Today, we're revealing secrets and mysteries of the Colosseum that you never imagined. What happened behind the scenes before the battles? How could such a brutal and spectacular event serve as a tool of power for the emperors? And does the Colosseum hold something more, something hidden within its ruins, waiting to be discovered? Stay with me until the end, because the truth about the Colosseum runs far deeper than you might think. Shall we begin? The sun was setting behind the towering columns of the Colosseum, casting a golden glow over its colossal marble and stone structure, a reflection of the empire's grandeur. As the shadows stretched longer, the echoes of Roman voices filled the streets. The immense amphitheater, rising like a monolith in the heart of Rome, was more than just a building. It embodied the unbreakable power of the empire. Every stone, every arch forming its massive circumference, carried the weight of centuries of history and the promise of new feats. The construction, begun under Emperor Vespasian and completed by his son Titus, was a monumental project designed to impress not only the Romans, but anyone who dared to walk the corridors of the empire. Its capacity to hold up to 80,000 spectators made it the largest arena of the ancient world, a place where life and death performed a deadly dance before the eyes of the public. In the center of that vast arena, where the scent of sweat and blood mingled with the roar of the crowd, gladiators and wild beasts took their final steps, turning brutality into spectacle. The Colosseum, with its imposing stands, was the stage where imperial politics met the primal instinct for entertainment. There, emperors not only displayed their military power, but also presented themselves as protectors of the people, feeding their need for blood and excitement. But behind the spectacle lay a meticulously calculated strategy. Every fight, every execution, every legend forged within its walls served a greater purpose: to keep the people of Rome in constant admiration, to keep the flames of loyalty burning, and to ensure that emperors remained figures of unquestionable authority. And as the doors of the Colosseum opened to welcome the crowd, one certainty filled the air. This was not just a place of entertainment, but a reflection of Rome's very soul. Its relentless grandeur, its merciless brutality, and the promise of a spectacle that would be remembered forever. In the days leading up to the games at the Colosseum, Rome was in a frenzy. The already bustling streets became a sea of anticipation and rumors. The squares filled with excited voices as people passionately debated which gladiators would fight that day and what the wild beasts, especially the lions and tigers brought from distant provinces, would do once unleashed in the arena. Bets extended beyond the fate of the combatants, covering everything from the type of battles to the executions that might take place if the emperor was in a particularly good mood. The marketplaces, always lively, became a spectacle of their own. Street vendors shouted to attract passers-by, offering all kinds of goods, from gladiator-shaped amulets to small clay replicas of the Colosseum. Clever merchants sold fine wines, roasted meats, and fresh bread, while others, more creative, offered special souvenirs, miniature statues of Roman gods or coins bearing the emperor's face, hoping to bring luck to those who purchased them. In the taverns scattered around the city, the tension was palpable. Romans, eagerly awaiting the grand spectacle, gathered in small groups, discussing the details of the upcoming fights, exchanging tales of legendary gladiators, or even sharing their own exaggerated stories as if they were experts in combat and survival. The boldest among them speculated on the outcomes, placing bets on which gladiator would emerge victorious, or whether any of the wild animals would win over the crowd with their ferocity. As the masses approached the Colosseum, a sense of excitement electrified the streets. Heralds, with their trumpets and commanding voices, roamed the squares and avenues, announcing the event's attractions. Today, the greatest gladiators will stand before you. Ferocious lions, the grandest spectacle of ancient Rome. The sound of trumpets echoed, intensifying the anticipation and drawing everyone, peasants and nobles alike, toward the mighty amphitheater. At that moment, Rome was in a state of collective euphoria, its very walls seeming to vibrate with the empire's pulsating energy. The Colosseum was not just a center of entertainment. It was the heart of the city, the meeting point of a people who lived for the empire's grandeur and the brutal games that became legends with each passing day. In ancient Rome, entering the Colosseum was not simply a matter of buying a ticket. Access to the city's greatest spectacle was an honor and a privilege, and the ticketing system, or rather, the way entry was organized, reflected the empire's strict social hierarchy. Instead of paper tickets as we know them today, Romans used small plaques called tesserae, made of wood or bone. Each tessera corresponded to a specific seat in the arena, identifying the section, row, and seat number. These plaques were distributed for free by the emperor or local officials as a way to keep the people satisfied and entertained. It was an act of imperial generosity, a means for rulers to secure the loyalty of the masses, who saw the games as a reaffirmation of Rome's greatness. However, despite being free, obtaining a tessera was not easy. Those who wanted front-row seats had to rely on the goodwill of senators or high-ranking patrons who often distributed these plaques as favors, either to gain the people's favor or, more strategically, to secure political support. The distribution of tickets was deeply political. By granting a tessera to a spectator, the emperor or a politician was not just offering entertainment. They were strengthening their bond with the public, presenting themselves as generous and attentive to their needs. For those outside the elite, getting a tessera was much more difficult. They had to rely on luck, favors from friends, or last-minute announcements offering extra tickets to the most desperate. But even in the highest and farthest rows, the Colosseum was a place of unity, where rich and poor alike came together to witness the drama of combat and the empire's greatness. When the day of the games arrived, the sound of the crowd gathering at the Colosseum's gates was deafening. Citizens, tesserae in hand, passed through the entrances, eager to take their seats. It was a unique experience, a blend of anticipation, euphoria, and a touch of fear, for deep down, everyone knew they were about to witness something far greater than mere entertainment. It was a reaffirmation of imperial power, a celebration of life and death, of glory and brutality. As the Colosseum's doors swung open and the crowd poured inside, the meaning of the tesserae went beyond a simple entry pass. They were symbols of an unbeatable Rome, where even entertainment was a tool of control, a way to keep the people at the edge of power, yet deeply bound to its magnificence. The Colosseum, with its grandeur and masterful architecture, was not just a venue for events, but a visible reflection of Rome's rigid hierarchy. Every seat in the immense arena was meticulously assigned, and the distribution of the stands followed a strict social order that divided Romans not only by wealth, but by political and social status. The section closest to the arena, known as the podium, was reserved for senators and the most influential figures of the empire, the men at the very top of the Roman hierarchy. Those who occupied these seats were not just spectators. They had a privileged vantage point, allowing them to observe, comment, and even exert influence over the events unfolding below, as if they held the power to decide who would live and who would die. The podium was the sacred space of power, where the elite gathered to witness the spectacle of bloodshed while remaining far removed from the common people. Just above the podium, in the areas known as the Medianum Primum, sat the Roman equites, or knights, people who, while lacking the political status of senators, wielded significant influence in the economy and society. The equites held a prestigious position, enabling them to feel part of the elite without mingling with the true rulers of the city. The roar of the crowd echoed, even louder around them, a constant reminder of their place among Rome's most powerful. Higher up, in the Medianum Secundum, were the common citizens of Rome, the backbone of the empire. These were the men and women whose names did not echo through the halls of power, but whose labor sustained the imperial machine. Workers, artisans, soldiers, and plebeians filled these seats, experiencing every fight, every battle, and every death with a unique intensity. For them, the Colosseum was the pinnacle of the Roman experience, a place where they felt connected to the empire, its history, and its greatness, despite being far removed from the upper classes. Finally, in the highest stands, or Medianum Summum, sat women and those at the lowest rungs of the social ladder. Here, the heat of the crowd, the intensity of the combat, and the deafening noise of the spectacles were felt from a distance, yet the emotion was no less vivid. For women, especially those of the lower classes, the Colosseum was both a refuge and a vantage point. From up high, they could enjoy the games but remained, in a sense, apart from the theater of violence, as if the empire wanted to ensure that their social standing remained unchanged, even in moments of leisure. The separation of social classes was more than just a matter of comfort. It was a reinforcement of Rome's strict hierarchy, a reminder that, although all shared the same space, the empire never lost sight of its order. In the Colosseum, The brutality of the games was not only a source of entertainment, but also a means of reinforcing the power structure that made Rome the most feared and respected empire of the known world. Every cheer from the crowd, every moment of suspense, echoed not just through the corridors of the arena, but also through the corridors of power. The Colosseum was not just an architectural marvel. It was a masterpiece of efficiency, designed to accommodate around 80,000 spectators while ensuring that events ran seamlessly. Behind the grandeur of the arena lay a complex logistical system that allowed for the swift movement of crowds and the flawless execution of the spectacles. The structure was organized around 80 numbered gates, known as vomitoria. These gates were not just an architectural curiosity. They played a crucial role in crowd management. The name vomitoria comes from the Latin word vomere, meaning to expel, not, as some might assume, from anything related to vomiting. It referred to the way in which, during moments of mass influx, people were expelled into the arena in a fast and orderly manner. The Colosseum was designed to empty within minutes, a remarkable feature for its time. Thanks to these gates, thousands of spectators could enter and exit so efficiently that, once a spectacle ended, the arena could be cleared and prepared for the next event in record time. Additionally, the internal layout of the Colosseum, with its independent corridors and passageways, ensured that different social classes did not mix during entry and exit. Senators and high-ranking figures had their own exclusive entrances, separate from those of the plebeians, preventing chaos and reinforcing the social hierarchy even in moments of great movement. But the logistics extended beyond the spectators. The hypogeum, the vast network of underground tunnels and chambers beneath the arena, was where the real magic happened. Here, gladiators, wild animals, and stage sets were stored and prepared before being lifted into the arena through a sophisticated system of platforms and elevators. It was a secret and fascinating world, where the backstage of the Colosseum came to life. Beneath the spectators' feet, battles, performances, and executions were being rehearsed or waiting to unfold. The system of elevators and hidden mechanisms in the hypogeum allowed wild animals, lions, tigers, and even elephants, to be released into the arena unexpectedly, creating moments of shock and pure adrenaline. These mechanisms were not only impressive but also dangerous, as both the beasts and the men who operated them knew all too well. Likewise, gladiators waited in silence behind the scenes, anxiously anticipating their call to the arena, uncertain whether glory or death awaited them. In the end, the Colosseum, with its remarkable capacity to accommodate and organize an immense crowd, became a symbol of Rome itself. Every event, every spectacle, was a masterpiece of logistics and strategy that reflected the empire's power and sophistication. By ensuring the seamless operation of the arena, Rome demonstrated not only its dominance over the games, but also its control over life and death. In the days leading up to the games at the Colosseum, Rome came alive. The city buzzed with palpable energy, as if everyone, without exception, was about to witness an event of epic proportions. The marble-paved streets, where citizens hurried along, seemed to pulse with excitement, absorbing the murmur of conversations spreading through markets and taverns. The anticipation only grew with the arrival of the heralds, who roamed the busiest neighborhoods with trumpets and makeshift megaphones, announcing the grand event ahead. Prepare yourselves. The Colosseum opens its doors tomorrow. The heralds' voices rang out. Their words were more than just an announcement. They ignited the people's fervor. Rumors spread like wildfire as Romans speculated about which gladiators would take center stage, which beasts would be unleashed, and what kinds of executions would take place. Every detail added an air of mystery and excitement, as if each event promised to be more spectacular than the last. The impact of the games on the people was immense. Young and old gathered in taverns to debate who would emerge victorious in the upcoming battles, or which gladiator had stood out in training. Bets flowed like a river, as Romans tried to predict the fate of the combatants. Taverns overflowed with eager discussions, and a sense of camaraderie grew among those who shared the anticipation. It was almost like a public festival, one that united everyone with a single purpose: to experience the Colosseum, even if only as an observer. And as evening fell, casting long shadows over the city, the spirit of the games took hold of Rome. The noise in the streets never ceased, and even street vendors seemed to understand that this was a unique moment in everyone's lives. The city braced itself for the grand day ahead, and though there was a certain tension in the air, there was also a collective sense of pride. The games at the Colosseum were more than just entertainment. They were a representation of Rome's strength and grandeur. With hearts pounding faster, the Romans prepared to experience the spectacle as if it were their last. While the streets of Rome buzzed with excitement for the upcoming games, what unfolded behind the scenes at the Colosseum was just as remarkable, though far less visible to the crowds. Beneath the great amphitheater, a silent and meticulous operation was underway, hidden from the curious eyes of the public, but essential to the success of every spectacle. The arena, with its vast sandy floor, began to be prepared days before the event. Slaves and laborers worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was perfect. The arena's floor needed to be covered with a fresh layer of sand to absorb the blood that would inevitably be spilled during the combats. But it wasn't just the sand that required attention. The hypogeum, the expansive network of underground tunnels beneath the arena, was where the real magic happened. This complex system of passageways and chambers was where gladiators, wild beasts, and stage sets were stored before being lifted into the arena. The preparation for the spectacle began in the labyrinthine hypogeum, where everything was carefully organized. Gladiators warmed up in the shadows, anxiously waiting for the moment they would be called to fight for their lives or glory. But they weren't alone in this underground world. The wild beasts, some of nature's most ferocious animals, waited impatiently in their cages, surrounded by slaves who kept them fed and under control until the moment of their release. Beasts such as lions, tigers, and even elephants were a key part of the spectacle. Their roars could be heard throughout the arena, and the fear they instilled in both the gladiators and the audience added an element of unpredictability and excitement to the event. Down below, however, the laborers were far from enjoying a peaceful job. They managed complex and high-risk mechanisms. The lifting platforms and trapdoors, driven by pulleys and winches, were used to raise gladiators and animals into the arena. The operation of these devices required impressive precision, and any mistake could lead to disasters for both the fighters and the spectators. Preparations also included the assembly of elaborate stage sets, transforming the arena into different scenes. It could be turned into a sandy desert, a dense forest, or even a stormy sea, depending on the planned event. To create these elaborate settings, the workers labored quickly and efficiently, often racing against the clock to ensure everything was ready before the audience began to settle in. Artificial trees, sand dunes, and other elements were meticulously positioned to create a realistic illusion that left the crowd in awe. Yet behind this facade of grandeur, the backstage work was hard, silent, and exhausting. Nervous gladiators, restless beasts, and complex sets were just some of the challenges faced beneath the Colosseum's surface. Even before the arena's doors opened and the crowd began to cheer, the true heroes were those working behind the scenes, ensuring that the spectacle unfolded flawlessly. When the gates finally opened and the gladiators appeared before the watchful eyes of the public, few knew that the spectacle was the result of meticulous preparation, a blend of sweat and life-threatening risk in the underground, hidden from view but essential to the Colosseum's magnificence. The event itself wasn't an everyday occurrence but reserved for special dates, such as public holidays, the birthdays of emperors, or military victory celebrations. The most famous and grand event was the inauguration of the Colosseum in 80 AD, a spectacle etched into the memory of every Roman. For 100 consecutive days, Rome was swept up in a wave of games that not only celebrated the new amphitheater, but also reinforced the idea that Rome was undoubtedly the greatest power in the ancient world. Emperor Titus, who oversaw the inauguration, led the grand celebration. It was an event so magnificent that the Colosseum brimmed with promises and expectations of an even more prosperous and powerful future for the Roman Empire. During those 100 days, Rome came to a standstill. Workers abandoned their trades, families gathered, and citizens flocked to the Colosseum, as if the entire city were preparing for the greatest celebration in its history. Inside the Colosseum, the atmosphere was charged with a unique tension. The stands were divided into distinct sections, and as the crowd took their seats, Rome's social hierarchy became palpable. When the doors finally opened and the games began, a hush fell over the audience, only to be replaced by an overwhelming roar of applause and shouts of encouragement. What followed was a true celebration of Rome's power, where violence and glory intertwined to create an unforgettable spectacle. During these days of festivity, Rome transformed into a city with one voice. The spirit of the empire was reflected in every cheer for the fighters, and for the Romans, The games were a way to reaffirm their loyalty to the emperor and the greatness of Rome. Even though death and brutality were ever present in each combat, the sense of unity and belonging to the greatest civilization in the world resonated deeply in the hearts of those watching. The Colosseum was more than just a venue for entertainment. It was a masterpiece of Roman engineering, reflecting the genius of the era's engineers and the grandeur of the empire. Every stone, every detail, was conceived to create an environment capable of accommodating the vast number of people who gathered to watch the games, while also providing the best experience for both the audience and the gladiators. Its monumental and innovative structure not only pushed the limits of contemporary architecture, but also ensured that the Colosseum was functional, durable, and above all, a reflection of Rome's power. The construction of the Colosseum was an achievement of impressive magnitude. The first thing that struck any visitor was its enormous scale. With a diameter of 189 by 156 meters and a height of up to 48 meters, the Colosseum could hold up to 80,000 spectators, who could enter and exit with surprising ease thanks to its sophisticated engineering. Rather than a single entry point, the Colosseum boasted 80 gates, called vomitoria, which allowed the crowd to move in and out rapidly. These gates not only ensured safety, but also allowed the Colosseum to be emptied completely within minutes, a feat that would be considered a marvel even by modern engineering standards. Inside, the organization was meticulously planned. The arena was a large sandy platform with an intelligent drainage system to ensure that the blood of gladiators and the sweat of the beasts didn't accumulate on the floor. This was crucial not only for the comfort of the spectators, but also for hygiene, an uncommon concern in most public venues in ancient Rome. The efficient drainage system prevented the arena from becoming waterlogged or muddy, especially during events that simulated naval battles. Furthermore, the Colosseum featured an impressive system of trapdoors and lifting platforms. Using a complex mechanism of pulleys and winches, these devices allowed gladiators, beasts, and even entire sets to be elevated to the center of the arena in seconds. Every movement was precise and orchestrated, creating surprises for the audience, who never knew what to expect. The beasts could emerge suddenly from beneath the floor, producing a dramatic effect that heightened the intensity of the spectacle. For the gladiators, this engineering not only kept them ready for combat, but also served as a constant reminder of the empire's strength and the vastness of the Colosseum. Another notable aspect of the Colosseum's engineering was its circular design. The elliptical structure was not merely for aesthetics. It was a practical solution that ensured no spectator's view was obstructed. Every seat, from those closest to the arena to those high above, offered a clear view of the combat, thanks to the gentle incline of the stands. Moreover, the seating arrangement mirrored the Roman social hierarchy, with senators and high-ranking figures occupying the seats nearest to the action, while the lower classes sat in the upper tiers. And of course, there was the hypogeum, the underground system beneath the arena. It was a world of its own, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers that housed not only gladiators and wild beasts, but also equipment and stage props used in the grand performances. This subterranean complex was essential to the functioning of the Colosseum, allowing the spectacle to flow seamlessly, with gladiators and animals being transported almost invisibly to the center of the arena. Over the centuries, the Colosseum has suffered damage, but its ingenious design and construction techniques continue to be studied as a brilliant example of how Roman engineering was ahead of its time. Built with Roman concrete and clad in stone, its durability has withstood earthquakes and looting, and its structure still impresses those fortunate enough to see it up close. Even in ruins, the Colosseum remains a testament to the ingenuity and grandeur of the Roman Empire, reflecting not only its military and political power, but also the technical innovations that made Rome an immortal civilization. As one approached the Colosseum, the growing noise of the crowd blended with the sounds of the city of Rome. Street vendors shouted their offers, trying to attract last-minute buyers before the gates closed. Every corner of the entrance was filled with a festive atmosphere, as citizens from all social classes prepared for the event. Entering the Colosseum was an almost ritualistic experience, a transition from the outside world to the imposing heart of the empire. Those arriving were met by a long line of Praetorian guards, clad in their gleaming armor, inspecting the tesserae, the small admission plaques that granted access to the spectacle. These tiny wooden or bone tokens, engraved with numbers and letters, were not just entry passes that made the event free for all, but also tools of social control. They were more than mere pieces of material. They were symbols of power and privilege, maintaining order and reinforcing class distinctions. As spectators moved forward, each group made their way to their designated section. With its 80 numbered gates, the Colosseum was designed to accommodate everyone efficiently and without chaos. Each sector had its own entrances, and the corridors were wide enough to allow even the slowest attendees to reach their seats without rush or discomfort. Even in the highest sections, the layout was organized and well-planned, reflecting Rome's commitment to ensuring that everyone, from senators to commoners, felt part of the grand event. As the crowd settled in, the murmur of excitement grew, but there was also a sense of reverence in the air. Everyone knew they were about to enter a place where history would be made before their eyes. For the Romans, the Colosseum was not just a venue for entertainment, but an expression of the empire's strength, a spectacle that united them in a shared experience of glory and thrill. Stepping into the Colosseum provided the first glimpse of what awaited, its massive amphitheater towering above them, its imposing walls and majestic columns reflecting the sunlight. The shadows stretched as the day progressed, and visitors could feel the weight of history as they passed through those doors, as if they were becoming part of something far greater than themselves. The anticipation of witnessing something unique was almost tangible. The sounds of the city faded as the iron gates closed behind the spectators, creating a distinct atmosphere. The audience now found themselves immersed in an environment that seemed to separate them from the rest of Rome, transporting them into a world of total immersion, where the spectacle about to unfold would dominate all emotions and expectations. The last echoes of vendors and hurried conversations dissipated, giving way to the growing murmur of the settling crowd, eagerly awaiting the grand beginning. The moment the doors finally shut, the Colosseum was whole, and the great performance was about to begin. The Colosseum was not just a marvel of Roman architecture. It was also a masterpiece of design, crafted to maximize the spectator experience. From the initial blueprints to the final construction, every element was meticulously planned to ensure that every person, regardless of social class or status, had a clear and breathtaking view of the action in the arena. Its elliptical structure, over 180 meters long and 150 meters wide, was designed to provide unobstructed sight lines for all spectators. The steeply sloped stands ensured that even those seated in the highest sections, far from the heart of the arena, could see every movement, every strike, and every detail of the combat. The seating didn't just rise in height, it was also angled in a way that created an illusion of proximity. No matter where one sat, the audience felt as if they were part of the event, immersed in the action, as if the battles were happening all around them. Each seat was strategically positioned to reflect Roman hierarchy, while also offering a unique visual and auditory experience. The wealthiest citizens occupied the most coveted spots, closest to the arena, where they had a direct view of the fights. However, the Colosseum's design ensured that even those seated in the highest stands could still feel the intensity of the spectacle. The curved rows of seats and the circular shape of the amphitheater eliminated blind spots, ensuring that visibility was never compromised. The seating arrangement wasn't just about comfort, it was a reflection of social class. The highest tier, the Medianum Summum, was designated for women and lower-class citizens, providing a wide but more distant view of the arena. Meanwhile, the lower sections were reserved for senators and the city's elite, granting them a close-up experience that symbolized power and status. The Murmillo gladiators, with their large swords, battled within view of the nobles, while the masses filled the higher sections, where the roar of the crowd blended with enthusiastic cheers. Beyond sight lines, the design also created an immersive experience for the ears. The acoustics of the Colosseum amplified and directed sound in a way that made the roar of the crowd and the clash of weapons seem to come from all directions. The structure funneled sound strategically, enhancing the sense of involvement, making each spectator feel as though they were inside the battle, experiencing the action firsthand. The arena's sloped design also heightened the drama of the event. As combat intensified, the sensation of closeness and imminent action became even more powerful. For the audience, this created a one-of-a-kind experience, where the line between spectator and combatant seemed to blur, making everyone feel part of the grand spectacle, immersed in a world of violence, bravery, and entertainment. Each of the thousands of spectators in the Colosseum knew that watching the fight was more than just passive entertainment. Their gaze was part of the magic of the spectacle. Every move, every turn of the head, every step taken by the gladiators was closely followed, and the emotions of the crowd intertwined with those of the warriors on the sand. The Colosseum was not just a place of amusement. It was a stage where architecture and engineering merged to create a collective and immersive experience. Behind the grandeur and the violence of the battles that thrilled the masses lay an ingenious system of hidden mechanisms that made the Colosseum's spectacles even more spectacular and unpredictable. What the audience saw on the arena floor was only the surface of a complex network of tricks, devices, and surprises, all designed to create a thrilling and suspenseful experience. One of the greatest secrets of the Colosseum was the hypogeum, the vast underground network of tunnels and passageways beneath the arena. There, gladiators, wild beasts, and even prisoners of war waited in total darkness, ready to be released into the arena at a moment's notice. The hypogeum was not just a holding area. It was a place of preparation and tension, where men and animals, with sweaty hands and racing hearts, awaited their fate. The mechanisms connecting the hypogeum to the arena were astonishing. Wooden elevators, powered by pulleys and ropes, transported armed gladiators or ferocious beasts straight to the center of the action. These lifts were operated by slaves or specially trained workers who, in silence, set the stage for the brutal combats and dramatic effects that made the arena a spectacle of pure action. Each elevator could rise unexpectedly, making it seem as if gladiators or animals had simply materialized out of nowhere, summoned, as some believed, straight from the underworld. Beyond the elevators, the Colosseum was equipped with trapdoors and hidden openings that allowed different elements to appear suddenly and dramatically. A gladiator might step into the arena, only for a massive beast to emerge from beneath the sand in an instant, turning the fight into an even more chaotic and perilous struggle. The element of surprise was an essential part of the show, and these mechanisms were carefully designed to heighten the audience's anticipation and excitement. At times, the arena transformed completely, creating an immersive experience for spectators. The lifting platforms and trapdoors enabled rapid changes to the battlefield. A simple shift in scenery could transport the audience to a dense forest or a scorching desert, altering the dynamics of the battles. It's easy to imagine the Romans, even accustomed to grand spectacles, being constantly amazed as the arena morphed into new landscapes before their eyes, presenting fresh challenges for the fighters. One of the most impressive features of the Colosseum was its drainage system. Since naval battles were among the most spectacular events, the arena needed to be flooded to stage clashes between warships. To achieve this, the Colosseum had a sophisticated hydraulic system that allowed it to be filled with water within minutes. Small warships, manned by gladiators or prisoners, engaged in epic battles that left the crowd in awe. But once the spectacle ended, the drainage system quickly emptied the water, allowing the arena to be cleaned and reset for the next event without delay. These mechanisms weren't just feats of engineering. They were integral to the spectacle itself. Every movement of the platforms, every roar of the beasts as they were raised from the darkness, every dramatic scenery change added layers of drama and adrenaline to the fights. The Colosseum, in all its complexity, was not just a battleground. It was a machine of entertainment, where every element was meticulously synchronized to keep the crowd at the peak of excitement, never allowing their attention to wane. The ingenuity behind the arena's mechanisms was therefore one of Rome's greatest secrets, and one of the keys to the Colosseum's enduring legacy. The Colosseum's arena was not a static space. It was a constantly shifting stage, designed to provide an unparalleled sensory experience for spectators. Each event was a fleeting masterpiece, where the arena transformed so dramatically that even Romans, accustomed to grandeur, were left in awe of its ability to create new worlds with every performance. In the hours leading up to the games, workers and slaves toiled frantically to modify the arena's scenery. What began as a simple battlefield could quickly turn into a vast desert, where gladiators and wild animals struggled against the harsh, arid conditions. Other times, the arena floor was covered in soft sand, simulating a beach or an open plain. But it wasn't only dry landscapes that appeared. There were moments when the arena was flooded, becoming the setting for naval battles where small warships clashed in an artificial sea, recreating legendary battles that transported spectators into a world of myth and adventure. The most breathtaking transformations, however, took place when the arena became a true battlefield simulation. An intricate system of lifts and mechanisms allowed artificial trees, hills, and even palaces to rise as part of the spectacle. What seemed like a simple combat arena could, in minutes, become a dense forest or a ruined city, where gladiators and wild animals fought in elaborate settings that tested their endurance and skills. Rocks, shrubs, and even the remnants of buildings emerged with astonishing speed, creating a visually stunning environment that made the audience feel as though they were witnessing an epic battle in some faraway, uncharted land. The transformation of the arena wasn't limited to visuals. Sounds and even scents were used to heighten the realism of the experience. In battles that reenacted clashes between Roman legions and barbarian forces, for example, drumbeats and war cries echoed throughout the Coliseum, creating an atmosphere of tension and suspense. The smell of burning earth or fire was released into the arena, amplifying the illusion of impending war. For simulated hunts and wild animal fights, the arena could be turned into a lush jungle. Artificial trees and bushes were strategically placed to create a dense habitat, where hunters and gladiators faced off against lions, tigers, and even elephants. The carefully arranged vegetation formed a labyrinth, forcing combatants to navigate through the wilderness while battling the fearsome creatures. These transformations were not just for entertainment. They were also a demonstration of the Roman Empire's power and wealth. Each scenery change was a testament to Roman engineering prowess and the empire's ability to craft fantastical worlds for the public's enjoyment. Moreover, these innovations reinforced the idea that Rome had no limits when it came to power, control, and creativity. Every arena transformation was meticulously planned, and though the audience never knew exactly what to expect, one thing was certain: the experience would never be the same. The Colosseum was a place where reality and fantasy intertwined, where battles became larger than life, and where each spectacle left an indelible mark on those lucky enough to witness the magic of its ever-changing stage. It was a rare spectacle, but when it happened, the Naumachii at the Colosseum transformed the arena into a breathtaking scene of naval warfare. Flooded to the necessary depth to create a miniature sea, the arena became the stage for naval battles that mesmerized the audience. These battles weren't just recreations. They were living demonstrations of Roman power and ingenuity. As preparations began, the city of Rome buzzed with excitement. Rumors spread through the streets that a naval battle would soon take place at the Colosseum. Markets filled with energy, and citizens flocked to taverns, eagerly placing bets and speculating on who would emerge as the hero or villain of this epic maritime showdown. Merchants seized the opportunity, selling miniature ship replicas and good luck charms depicting sailors and war vessels. In the public squares, musicians played songs celebrating ancient victories, while street performers imitated gladiators, dazzling crowds with acrobatics and mock battles. Finally, the day had arrived. The arena was ready, and the workers had transformed the Colosseum into a vast aquatic battlefield. Wooden beams supported the arena's floor, now covered by a layer of water. Some accounts suggest that even large cisterns were used to ensure the proper level of flooding, allowing small warships to navigate freely across the arena. The vessels were carefully positioned, prepared to recreate historical battles and mythical scenes with impressive detail. The crowd, already excited, fell into an expectant silence as the heralds announced the start of the spectacle. Then, with the sound of trumpets, the ships began to emerge, sailing across the artificial waters. It was a breathtaking sight. Each vessel was crafted to resemble great warships, complete with rowers and warriors, ready to engage in simulated combat. As the ships took their positions, the audience held its breath, knowing that at any moment, a bloody battle would begin, one that the Romans loved to witness. The sailors, often prisoners of war or criminals, fought with fierce determination. They wielded spears and operated catapults, trying to sink enemy ships or board opposing vessels for brutal hand-to-hand combat. The water in the arena mixed with the sound of screams and the clash of siege weapons, creating an atmosphere of palpable tension. Every movement of the combatants was met with roaring cheers from the crowd, who watched with the same thrill as if they were witnessing a real naval battle. To enhance the realism of the spectacle, the setting was meticulously designed. The artificial sea was accompanied by sound and visual effects, including thunderclaps and gusts of wind, simulating an open-sea storm. Smoke was released to create the illusion of burning ships, heightening the sense of danger. As if that weren't enough, mythical figures also took part in the battles, gods and sea monsters brought to life by actors and elaborate stage props. After long hours of combat, the battle reached its climax as the last ship either sank or surrendered, bringing the grand spectacle to an end. The surviving sailors were either celebrated or faced their fate, while the beasts from the hypogeum were unleashed for their own hunt in the arena, completing the cycle of entertainment. The impact of the Naumachii on the audience was profound. For the Romans, these battles represented Rome's ability to conquer and dominate even the seas. They were not just displays of military might, but also demonstrations of the empire's capacity to create such grand and realistic experiences that they transported spectators to another world, where war and victory were staged with epic grandeur. Naval battles in the Colosseum were undoubtedly among the most ambitious and memorable spectacles of Roman entertainment, embodying the peak of theatricality and ingenuity. Through these battles, Rome not only solidified its image as a great power, but also offered its citizens a display of its ability to shape reality, turning a simple venue into a stage for the most magnificent feats of war and adventure. The sound of trumpets echoed through the Colosseum, reverberating against the stones of the amphitheater, signaling that the most anticipated moment of the day was about to unfold, the entrance of the emperor. Like a god descending from the heavens to take his place among mortals, the emperor was not merely a political figure. He was the embodiment of Rome's power itself. His arrival at the Colosseum was always a grand spectacle, ensuring that all eyes were fixed on him, as if his presence alone justified the event's existence. The crowd, already buzzing with excitement from the games, fell into a reverent hush as the trumpets sounded, awaiting the emergence of their supreme leader. When he finally appeared, the Colosseum was transformed. Men and women, rich and poor alike, bowed in an almost religious manner before the imperial figure. He was not just a ruler, he was the living symbol of Rome's greatness, and his presence in the Colosseum was a reminder of the absolute power he wielded over the empire. The emperor made his entrance through the Porta Triumphalis, a gate reserved for such grand occasions. He was surrounded by a retinue of Praetorian guards, escorting him with an imposing presence befitting his status. Their gleaming armor formed an unbreakable line of defense, ensuring that no threat could approach him, reinforcing the image of invincibility that he projected. Dressed in his regal purple toga, a color symbolizing his authority and divine connection, he walked deliberately, allowing the crowd to take in his majestic presence. The heavy, ornate fabric of his toga flowed with his movements, as if Rome itself were embracing him in its grandeur. As he approached the podium, the trumpets grew louder, punctuating each step of his measured pace. The soldiers accompanying him stood rigid, their disciplined formation a testament to the order and control the emperor maintained over the empire. His gaze, impassive yet filled with authority, swept over the crowd as if surveying all of Rome itself, as if he were the guardian of every soul present. The moment the emperor reached his seat at the center of the podium, the most prestigious and visible area of the Colosseum, a respectful silence fell over the audience. Then, with a single gesture, he signaled his approval, and the entire amphitheater erupted into thunderous applause, cheers, and a storm of emotions. This was the ultimate recognition of his power, a public affirmation of his authority, and a reminder that his presence reinforced Rome's identity as the center of the world, where his rule was absolute. But the emperor's entrance was more than just a display of power. It was an unspoken contract with the people of Rome. Each time he entered the Colosseum, it was as if he was renewing his promise to keep Rome great and prosperous. He was not just a ruler, he was the hero of the masses, the figure who brought Rome's glory to its citizens, assuring them that their greatness was secure under his leadership. Furthermore, the emperor's entrance symbolized the continuity of the empire. He was the link between Rome's past and future, a reminder that despite crises or changes, the essence of Rome remained unshaken. For the Romans, seeing the emperor in the Colosseum was like witnessing an ongoing chapter of their own history, a spectacle that bound them together in loyalty and devotion to the empire. Thus, the emperor's entrance into the Colosseum was more than a simple ceremonial welcome. It was a moment of reaffirmation of Rome's absolute power, of its people's unity, and of the emperor's unchallenged rule. It was a ritual that transcended mere entertainment, forging an unspoken pact that connected senators and plebeians alike in a silent vow of respect and reverence. And as he observed the battles and games, his presence served as a reminder that beneath the surface of bloodshed and combat, it was he who ruled, protecting and consolidating the grandeur of Rome. The entrance of the gladiators was undoubtedly one of the most electrifying moments of the games. As the central gate swung open, the crowd fell into an expectant hush, only to be swept up moments later by a surge of cheers and applause. And then they appeared, the gladiators. Men of different ages and origins, yet all bound by a common fate: the fight for survival in the arena of the Coliseum. The first thing that struck the audience was the sheer presence of the gladiators. They did not merely enter as fighters. Their appearance and posture were carefully crafted to captivate the crowd. Some bore gleaming armor, like the Murmillo warriors, wielding their large shields and short swords. Others carried nets and tridents, like the retiarius, or heavier weaponry, depending on their gladiatorial type. Each had a distinct identity, reflecting both their skills and personal story. Their attire and armaments made the spectacle even more vibrant, as each type of gladiator offered a unique fighting style, a deadly dance under the watchful eyes of the crowd. As the gladiators walked through the arena, their steps were firm and full of determination. They knew the fight was not just for entertainment. It was to secure their honor, to assert themselves as true heroes of ancient Rome, or in some cases, to seek freedom through victory. Each one carried the same flame in their eyes: the will to fight for life, to earn the favor of the crowd, and to prove their worth before the emperor. As they walked, the famous shout echoed through the stands: Ave Imperator, morituri te salutant. Hail, Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. What seemed like a phrase of farewell or resignation actually carried deep respect, and even a certain audacity. By greeting the emperor this way, the gladiators were not merely submitting to his will. They were asserting that, in the battlefield, they were masters of their own fate, even if that meant a fight to the death. This cry, reverberating off the stone walls of the Colosseum, made the blood of the crowd boil. It was the anticipation of something grand, something that could not be easily forgotten. And for the gladiators, this moment represented more than just a simple gesture of respect for the emperor. It was a way to defy fate itself, as if by uttering it, they declared that they were ready to face death head-on, with courage and honor. It was the very essence of combat, where life and death were intertwined, and only skill, strength, and cunning could determine the victor. The emperor's gaze, seated on his throne, did not go unnoticed. It was as if he were a deity observing the human sacrifice from his golden tower, waiting to decide the fate of those who would face each other in the arena. For the gladiators, that gaze meant everything: approval or condemnation. As they advanced to the center of the arena, each gladiator positioned themselves, ready for the fight. The silence that preceded the confrontation was heavy, almost ritualistic. The air felt dense, charged with expectations. The tension was palpable. The crowd watched intently, waiting for the first move, the first strike. In that moment, the Colosseum became a temple of battle and glory, where the gladiators turned into almost mythological figures, ready to write their own legend. Each movement in the arena, each clash, would be recounted and retold in the markets and taverns of Rome, discussed by Romans from plebeians to nobles. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if the gladiator was a prisoner of war or a free man. What mattered was their courage, skill, and ability to survive the most extreme test Rome could offer. The Colosseum was not just an arena, it was the stage for a battle between life and death, where brutality mixed with strategy. The fights between gladiators were more than mere physical confrontations. They were true spectacles, designed to test the fighter's skills, reflexes, and cunning. When the arena doors closed, a heavy silence took over, soon followed by the clanging of armor and the roar of the crowd, who were preparing to witness what many called the purest form of entertainment. Each battle was a choreography of violence. The duel between gladiators may have seemed chaotic at first glance, but it was far from it. It was a strategic fight, with each warrior using what they knew best: quick attacks, smart defenses, and mastery of their weapons. The Murmillos, with their short swords and large shields, tried to corner their opponents, using brute force and withstanding blows with their heavy shields. The Retiarii, on the other hand, were more agile, using their nets and tridents to immobilize and strike with precision. But there was something more in the fights, something that made them even more exciting. The unpredictability of the game meant that the crowd never knew what to expect. A gladiator who seemed to have the victory assured could, in an instant, be knocked down by a cunning move from their opponent. And the one who seemed on the brink of defeat could, with an unexpected maneuver, turn the game in their favor. Every strike, every block, every dodge was a step toward glory or death. The crowd was completely absorbed in the fight. Their shouts, both of support and anger, echoed throughout the arena. When a decisive blow was landed, the applause rang out, mixed with cheers of approval. But if a gladiator failed, if their defense faltered, the crowd showed their displeasure with whistles and boos, increasing the pressure on the fighters. There was no escaping the expectation. Every gladiator knew that their performance in the arena would determine their fate. But the battles weren't just exchanges of blows between gladiators. On some occasions, the Colosseum became the setting for epic fights between men and wild beasts, creating an even more terrifying and impressive spectacle. Lions, tigers, bears, and even elephants were released into the arena to face the gladiators, who had to fight not only each other but also these ferocious animals, often armed with nothing but a sword or a trident. The tension in the battles between gladiators and beasts was palpable. The sound of a beast's roar approaching, or the swish of a sword cutting through the air, made every spectator hold their breath. A well-trained gladiator knew that, to survive these encounters, they needed to be more than just a fighter. They needed to be a strategist, capable of using the environment, weapons, and even the opponent's mind to their advantage. But the most fascinating element of the spectacle was undoubtedly the final decision. When a gladiator fell to the ground, defeated and covered in blood, the gaze of the crowd turned to the emperor, waiting for the sign of life or death. A thumb gesture, up or down, was what separated life from death. The fate of the fighter was now in the hands of the one who held Rome's absolute power. Sometimes, the crowd became so immersed in the spectacle that their reaction influenced the emperor's decision, who, in the face of applause or boos, would make a choice that would echo throughout history. The sound of the sword slicing through the air, the roar of a beast, the cheers of the crowd, all of this blended into the spectacle of death and glory that unfolded within the walls of the Colosseum. Each fight, each duel, was a story unfolding before the eyes of the Romans. And for the gladiators, combat was not just a fight for life. It was an opportunity to leave their mark, to become part of the legend of the greatest stage of all, the Colosseum. In the Colosseum, a man's fate could be decided in a single gesture. With the fight over, silence would take over the arena for a moment, before the crowd began to react with shouts, applause, or boos. The following decision was the most important: life or death. The gladiators, sweating, bloodied, and exhausted, remained kneeling, awaiting the sentence that would determine their future. The tension was palpable. In the center of the arena, the emperor or the event sponsor, often with their back to the arena, would look out over the crowd. Their eyes scanning the field, they tried to discern the feelings of the people. What did the crowd desire? Who deserved to live, and who should pay with death? Their decision was not simple. It reflected absolute power and a direct connection with the people. It was a symbolic moment of power. It was the instant the emperor reaffirmed his control over life and death. When the emperor's gaze fell on the defeated gladiator, the blood and dust of the arena became a backdrop for a moment that represented the fragility of human life in the face of Rome's power. The gesture that followed was decisive. The emperor's thumb could move downward, signaling that death should be the reward for a humiliating defeat. The gladiator's fate would be sealed in that instant, and what had once been a life of glory and possibilities would be erased by a single sign. However, the thumbs up did not mean, as many believed, a sign of approval. It was, in fact, mercy, a gesture to indicate that the defeated gladiator deserved a chance at life. Sometimes, the crowd would unite in a plea for a second opportunity for the gladiator, and in such cases, the emperor would feel pressured to heed the crowd's wishes. The public's reaction was the factor that most influenced the final decision, which added a layer of unpredictability to every fight. But the most intriguing part was the silence, an almost ritualistic silence, that preceded the crucial moment. The defeated gladiator, lying on the ground, would gaze desperately at the emperor, waiting for his fate. Sometimes, a gladiator's gaze could be so penetrating, so full of anguish and hope, that even the emperor, who held all the power, would feel the weight of responsibility. After all, how could one decide the fate of a man in front of those bloodthirsty crowds? The moment of decision was not just about one person. It represented the essence of the struggle for power. Rome, unbeatable, eternal, offered its citizens the illusion that they could control life and death, and the Colosseum was the center of this display of authority. There, in the arena, death was treated as a spectacle, a celebration not only of strength, but also of the power of the final decision. If the gladiator was spared, he would leave the arena not only with his life intact, but also with the right to carry great honor. He became a hero, celebrated not only for his combat skills, but also for the opportunity to prove his strength in front of the crowd once more. Many surviving gladiators, known for their courage and skill, could earn their freedom or, at the very least, become wealthy and famous. But for the defeated, the judgment was not so simple. When the thumb turned down, it signified that the spectator no longer deserved the mercy of the empire. The echo of that fatal gesture reverberated through the arena, and the gladiator fell, marked by the sword that sealed his fate, while the crowd either cheered or walked away with an impassive face. These moments, cruel and intense, were more than just public executions. They were symbols of power, control, and human fragility. Death in the Colosseum was not just an end, but part of a greater cycle that showcased ancient Rome in all its glory and brutality, where destinies were sealed not by an impartial judge, but by a gesture, a glance, and a crowd ready to decide what was just or necessary to maintain order and power. When the sun tilted toward the horizon and the fights in the Colosseum paused, the arena transformed. The silence that always preceded the combats gave way to a new wave of excitement. While the arena was cleaned and prepared for the next event, Romans could relax and enjoy other types of entertainment that took over every corner of the vast space. It was at this moment that street vendors spread through the Colosseum's corridors, offering everything from fresh fruit to small bronze amulets symbolizing luck and divine protection. The scent of sweet wine and warm bread mixed with the aroma of incense burned by priests to ensure prosperity and the continuation of the festivities. In the stands, conversations bubbled among the spectators. Women, seated in the higher parts, spoke softly, while the men discussed the fights and the bets made during the break. The atmosphere of camaraderie and celebration took over, and the rivalries that happened inside the arena blended with the rivalries among the spectators, who also sought to prove their superiority. But the Colosseum was more than just a place of simple rest. During these breaks, it became a platform for demonstrations of skill and courage. While the audience awaited the next act, experienced hunters entered the arena, armed with sharp spears and heavy armor, to face wild beasts in an improvised hunt. Lions, tigers, and even bears were released into the arena, and the hunters fought them as if their lives were at stake, providing the crowd with another adrenaline rush. These hunts were seen as the ultimate display of human strength, but also a representation of Roman domination over the wild nature. The Colosseum, then, became a microcosm where not only the brutality between men was tested, but also the battle against beasts that symbolized chaos and the threat to the empire's order. In another corner of the arena, the sound of drums and trumpets announced a special attraction. The gladiatresses, women who had also been trained in the arts of combat. They were not just exotic figures, but formidable warriors who entered the arena with unwavering courage. For the crowd, their battles were a mixture of fascination and discomfort. The idea of women fighting like men challenged Roman society's norms, and many watched these fights with a curiosity that made them question the position of women in society. For the gladiatresses, each fight was a chance to prove that their strength and skill were just as powerful as those of their male counterparts. However, the highlight of the break was often the public execution of prisoners of war or condemned criminals. These moments were some of the most eagerly awaited attractions by the Romans, as they served not only as a demonstration of imperial power, but also as a lesson in public morality. The prisoners were often forced to face wild beasts in a deadly struggle. The victory of the beast, or the criminal who managed to survive, was a story that would soon spread throughout Rome, increasing the fascination with the Colosseum. Meanwhile, magistrates and guards circulated among the crowd, ensuring that order was maintained and that no one misbehaved. Even during the breaks between shows, Rome knew how to keep its control over the crowd's emotions. Any misstep was severely punished, ensuring that the Romans, in their quest for entertainment, never lost sight of the respect for hierarchy and the authority of the empire. But despite the various attractions that filled the breaks, nothing could rival the growing anticipation that finally, the arena would be occupied once more. The sound of trumpets announcing the return of the combats would send the crowd back into a frenzy. The bets were adjusted, the gladiators prepared backstage, and the spectacle resumed its course, with more blood, more sweat, and more emotion. During the breaks between the games, the Colosseum was not just a space for rest, but a pulsating center of life, expectation, and enjoyment. It was where the Romans gathered to celebrate the grandeur of the empire and at the same time, test the limits of human and animal courage. The Colosseum was, without a doubt, one of the greatest and most magnificent undertakings of the Roman Empire. Its construction, in addition to representing Rome's power, had a profound impact on the city's economy and, by extension, the entire empire. The arena, with its bloody fights and grand spectacles, was not just a place of entertainment. It was a functioning economic machine, generating wealth in various ways. First, the events held in the Colosseum were free for the public, but that did not mean there was not a huge source of income associated with it. Instead, the real profit came from the commercial opportunities created around the games. Rome, as the beating heart of the empire, was already a vibrant commercial center, and the Colosseum only expanded that characteristic. During the days of the shows, the streets of the city would fill with street vendors who capitalized on the crowd eager to buy anything related to the games. T-shirts, gladiator figurines, medallions with the emperor's face, and even Lucky Charms were sold around the Colosseum. Additionally, food and drink vendors with their stalls and carts thrived, providing the spectators with what they needed to eat and drink during the entire day of entertainment. Wine, always present at Roman festivities, flowed freely, while the aromas of roasted meat and fresh bread mixed with the scent of sweat and adrenaline. The nearby taverns also benefited, with tables packed with Romans discussing the recently witnessed spectacle while consuming more and more. But the economic impact of the Colosseum wasn't limited only to local merchants. The Roman Empire, which knew very well how to organize large-scale events, treated the games as a form of political propaganda, a way to ensure that the people remained loyal to the emperor and his administration. By sponsoring these events, the emperor not only gained popular support, but also attracted the attention of elites from other regions of the empire, consolidating his power and influence. This, in turn, led to greater political stability, which benefited Rome's economy as a whole. Another crucial aspect was the impact on jobs and the slave trade. The Colosseum generated a huge demand for slaves trained for various roles within the arena. Many gladiators, before being called to fight, were slaves or prisoners of war. Additionally, slaves were needed to maintain order, clean the arena, care for the animals, and even work behind the scenes, operating the mechanisms that made the arena function. This demand for slaves fueled the slave trade throughout the Mediterranean region. And we cannot forget the indirect impact on construction and maintenance sectors. The construction of the Colosseum involved the use of immense material resources, such as limestone, marble, and iron, extracted from various parts of the empire. The constant maintenance of the Colosseum, its cleaning, and the need to repair the structures supporting the shows required a continuous workforce, with craftsmen, engineers, and laborers always at work. On a broader level, the Colosseum also played an essential role in preserving social and political order. By entertaining the people, the emperor could minimize the risks of revolts or discontent. Instead of worrying about issues of poverty or social injustice, the people found themselves engaged in a constant distraction of entertainment that kept Roman society peaceful and disciplined. Peace and stability, in turn, were crucial for trade and economic growth in Rome. Therefore, the economic impact of the Colosseum wasn't limited just to the direct revenue generated by the events, but also to the numerous commercial and social activities that arose around it. Indirectly, its existence solidified Rome's position as the dominant power of the ancient world, and at the same time, fueled the economic machinery that sustained the empire. The Colosseum wasn't just a place of entertainment and violence. It was a vital force pulsing at the heart of Rome, fueling commerce, politics, the economy, and in a way, the very structure of the Roman Empire. Its influence extended far beyond the walls of the arena, touching every aspect of Roman life and leaving a legacy of prosperity that would endure for centuries. After the brutality of the battles in the Colosseum, Rome transformed. The scars of the arena, the cries and roars of gladiators and beasts, still echoed in the citizens' memories, but the streets of the city quickly filled with a different energy. The spectacle didn't end when the arena emptied. It infiltrated the daily lives of Romans, in the taverns, squares, and even the public baths, where the culture of the Colosseum unfolded in unexpected ways. In the taverns of Rome, the buzz about the arena events was incessant. Romans, armed with wine and bread, discussed every move of each gladiator, analyzing the battles with the precision of a general on the battlefield. Who was the hero? Who dishonored the gladiator's honor? How did that man survive so many beasts? And of course, the big question: who would be the next champion? Betting on who would win the battles was common, and the taverns became centers of cultural effervescence, with stories blending with reality, as if everyone had been a participant, a privileged spectator of the grandeur of the Colosseum. At the public baths, where Roman citizens gathered to relax and socialize, discussions about the games were just as lively. The space traditionally dedicated to hygiene and rest transformed into a battleground for heated debates. Romans would sit, rubbing their oil jars, and instead of talking about business or philosophy, they gave themselves over to memories lived at the Colosseum. Some became obsessed with the most charismatic gladiators, creating myths around their figures, while others discussed the politics behind the games. The Colosseum wasn't just a source of fun. It became intertwined with Roman culture and identity, with its citizens viewing the events as an extension of their social life and often as a metaphor for the empire itself. For the more intellectual, the Colosseum represented an allegory of the forces at play in the empire. They saw in the battles a reflection of the struggle between civilization and barbarism, between order and chaos. The games, with their raw violence, were not merely seen as entertainment, but as a symbolic representation of the struggles occurring both within and outside the empire's borders. However, these debates weren't restricted only to the educated elites. Even the simpler Romans, with their minds more focused on practicality, began to understand the political and cultural significance of the games. They no longer saw themselves just as spectators of battles, but as participants in a grand theater that symbolized Rome's very destiny. Children were also not left out of this cultural phenomenon. Even before reaching the age to participate in the grand festivities, they were immersed in stories of gladiators and epic victories. In the fields, children would play fight, mimicking the great heroes of the Colosseum, creating their own versions of battles with sticks as swords. These games were much more than a childhood pastime. They were a way of internalizing what it meant to be Roman, understanding the value of strength, honor, and loyalty. They learned early on to value these aspects, which, in the distant future, would shape their lives as citizens. The cultural impact of the games at the Colosseum was also evident in other forms of art. Sculptors and painters created portraits of famous gladiators, immortalizing their feats and ensuring that their image lived on for generations. The victories of the gladiators were celebrated on coins, statuettes, and even mosaics that adorned the homes of the wealthier Romans. The Colosseum, thus, transcended its function as a mere arena. It became an eternal symbol of Roman identity. The most interesting thing is that, as the years passed and the city of Rome continued to expand and change, the impact of the Colosseum never diminished. The stories of the games, the legends of the gladiators, and the political and power lessons the Romans drew from these fights continued to spread throughout the empire, maintaining their relevance not just in Rome, but in distant provinces, where the echoes of the battles came as a reminder of Rome's greatness. Even after the golden era of the Colosseum came to an end, its presence still profoundly influenced Roman culture. It wasn't just the memory of the grand spectacles that endured, but the very essence of what the Colosseum represented: a magnificent, fierce, and relentless Rome, always ready to entertain, dominate, and conquer. And so the post-games culture lived on, rooted in the lives of the Romans in art, philosophy, and of course in their daily conversations, which always revolved around the same words: glory, honor, and power. Even in the face of times where the collapse of empires and the transformations of civilizations, the Colosseum remains an imposing symbol of Rome's greatness and complexity. Its ruins, worn down by the action of the centuries, are still one of the most recognizable images in the world, silent witnesses of an era of splendor and brutality. But the Colosseum is not just a physical monument. It is a legacy of Rome, immortalized in stones and memories that transcend generations. When we look at the Colosseum, we see much more than just a simple stone amphitheater. It is a reflection of a culture that intertwined spectacle with politics, entertainment with oppression, and violence with celebration. In its construction, Rome not only demonstrated its technical skill, but also its profound understanding of how architecture could be used to reinforce power. The Colosseum was a tool of imperial propaganda. It was not just built for entertainment, but to cement the idea that Rome, as an empire, was invincible, unbeatable, and above all, it was the embodiment of the emperor's absolute power, a means to consolidate his authority and show the world his ability to control life and death, glory and shame. For centuries, The stones that form the Colosseum have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the changing of times, and the progression of history. The arena, once the site of bloody battles, now serves as a backdrop for tourists and scholars seeking to understand the complex interconnections between culture, politics, and entertainment in ancient Rome. However, for many, the Colosseum is more than just a symbol of antiquity. It is a testament to how the Roman spirit still lives in many modern cultures. The legacy of the Colosseum is also reflected in how it inspired the architecture of arenas and stadiums around the world. The idea of a place for large gatherings, where crowds come together to witness large-scale events, was born there, in its elliptical stands and its capacity to host a massive population. The concept of accessibility and a clear view from any point in the arena, as well as the division of space for different social classes, can be seen in modern stadiums and arenas, such as the Olympic Stadium and the Coliseum in London, both inspired by the great Roman structure. However, the true legacy of the Colosseum goes beyond its architecture. It is also a lesson in power, social control, and paradoxically, humanity. In the following centuries, the Colosseum continued to reflect how the Romans saw themselves as a civilization that, while indulging in violence and spectacle, also possessed a cultural complexity that transcended the limits of its time. It symbolized the resilience of the human spirit in the face of brutality, and at the same time, the tragedy of subjugation. On a deeper level, the Colosseum reflects the transience of life itself and the empire. It was grand at its peak, but over time, it suffered damage, was looted, and eventually almost fell into oblivion. Its current state serves as a reminder of the fragility of civilizations, of how even the most powerful empires can disintegrate over time. But at the same time, its survival is a symbol of resilience. Like Rome, the Colosseum constantly reinvents itself, remaining an icon that endures even after the grandeur of the Roman Empire has faded. Today, as we walk through the streets of Rome and approach the Colosseum, what we encounter is not just a reminder of a distant past, but the sense of a living, pulsating history. The Colosseum reminds us that, while civilizations may fall, the stories they create, the victories, the failures, the triumphs, and the dramas endure. The legacy of the Colosseum is a lesson that continues to be told, not only in history books but in the spirit of the people themselves, in the cities that build their own monuments to glory, and in the lives that still seek to understand the power and complexity of a Rome that, even in ruins, will never cease to impress. The Colosseum, with its majestic structure and immortal history, is not just a monument of ancient Rome, but a reflection of the very essence of the Roman Empire, a place where power, glory, brutality, and politics intertwine inextricably. It was more than just an entertainment field. It was a symbol of imperial strength, a stage where life and death were thrown to the crowd, and where spectators were both victims and accomplices in a spectacle of control and celebration. Looking at its ruins, it's impossible not to reflect on the complexities of this civilization, which managed to create one of the greatest powers of the ancient world while simultaneously indulging in violence, oppression, and the exhibition of human suffering. The Colosseum challenges us to think about the limits of power and control, about how a society can use entertainment not just as a form of distraction, but also as a way to assert its authority and manipulate the behavior of the masses. What the Colosseum teaches us, more than anything, is about human nature. It shows how entertainment can be used to sublimate conflicts, but also to exploit the weaknesses and desires of the population. And at the same time, it reveals how the greatness of a civilization does not only depend on its ability to create architectural wonders, but also on its ability to maintain order, subjugate enemies, and dominate the narrative. However, as we conclude our journey through the history of the Colosseum, we must recognize that its legacy goes beyond the history of Rome. It represents the power of memory and what remains, even when everything around us changes. Today, it continues to attract millions of people from all over the world, not as a simple monument to the brutality of an empire, but as a reminder that, despite adversities, human civilizations have the power to leave something lasting, something that endures for millennia, even when the world around us is no longer the same. In the end, the Colosseum is not just a construction of stones, but a construction of memory and identity, a reminder that while empires may fall and civilizations may crumble, the stories, lessons, and teachings we leave behind continue to speak across time. The Colosseum is proof that true greatness is not in surviving the moment, but in leaving a legacy that resonates through the generations. And so, we reach the end of our journey through the Grand Coliseum of Rome, a place where history, brutality, and grandeur met in a unique way, and which continues to fascinate us to this day. But what about you? What do you think about the impact of the Colosseum on the history of Rome and Western culture? Leave your opinion in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It's super important to motivate us to bring more content like this. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. Don't miss out on any updates about the history of Rome and other fascinating topics. We'll see you in the next video. Until then,